All right, give me a second. Hello, hello. We are about to begin. We are about to begin. We are now live on Where Were the Toomers? Hello, hello, everyone. We are about to begin. We are live on YouTube, live now, and we are going live on Facebook. Let us see. Let us see. Definitely live on YouTube. Let's see what's going on with our Facebook page. Are we live on the Facebook page? We are awaiting confirmation. Yes, we are live. There are a couple people on Facebook, and we are also live almost on YouTube. Just waiting to confirm that we are live on YouTube. One person's on YouTube, so hopefully it'll come up and show soon. All righty. So welcome, welcome, Cousin Floyd. Pull your head into the screen so we can see you. Pull it over a little bit to your right. So welcome, everyone. Today we have an amazing presentation because guess what tomorrow is? Juneteenth.
Juneteenth!
Woo! Tomorrow's Juneteenth. So the Toomers wanted to get ahead of schedule and just talk to you guys about the history of not only Juneteenth, but our family, and where we were positioned during Juneteenth, because that's what's important. It's important. That's why we kind of do genealogy. Like, don't you agree, Sharon and Floyd? It's important to kind of know where you came from, but it's really cool to know where your family was when these important
Yes.
historical events were taking place, right?
So you're putting your family in the context of the history that was going on at that
Uh-huh.
time they lived.
And talking about history, we are so blessed to have with us a very special guest. Her name is Sharon. I'm going to say it right. Batiste. Is
It's
it Batiste
good.
Gillen,
Hmm.
from the very place where Juneteenth began, and
The
that's
very place.
Galveston, Texas.
That's the very
Sharon,
place.
welcome.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here. I feel like I know all the tumors
You do. You
because
know
I've
all
heard
about our
about you all
history.
so much, and it has been a pleasure. You are very gifted to have Miss Shamel, Miss Tech, to pull all this together.
Oh,
So
thank you. We're very
yes,
lucky to actually have you here. In
thank
addition
you.
to having Sharon, whom I've met through genealogy, Sharon,
Mhm.
I actually met her first time at the Institute of Genealogy and
Wow.
Historical Research. And she was recommended to the African American course by a very highly regarded genealogist, whom I will not name, but to be recommended by this person meant that it was just like, oh, we must hang out with her because we must know what she is doing. So thank you so much for being here. And
Thank you for inviting me.
definitely want to introduce to everyone my cousin Floyd, who I tell everyone got me started in doing genealogy. And Floyd, I don't know whether I always tell people, I don't know whether to hug you tighter or to wring your neck, because since you taught me about genealogy, it has taken over my life in a happy way. In a happy way.
That's what happens.
So, without further ado, we are going to go ahead and get started with our program. Where were the Toomers on Juneteenth? And we already have some folks on who are commenting. Barbara Davis says she's waiting for the channel to start. Barbara, is the channel on yet? Do you see YouTube? Robin's here. Hello, Robin. So nice to see you. You guys definitely chat us up, ask questions. Floyd and Sharon, you guys can also see the chat too.
Okay, I see the chat.
Great to have you guys here. So first up, we are going to hear about the history of Juneteenth, which
History of
started
Juneteenth.
in Galveston, Texas. And we are talking to someone in Galveston, Texas to tell us all about it. So Sharon, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, you can definitely I still haven't been to Galveston, and I know it's on the water, and I know it's beautiful, and you have all kinds of beautiful plants. Me and Floyd are going to come down there and hang out with you. We have Rico in the house. Hey, Rico Simon, who is the grandson
Right,
of
yes.
Fred Toomer's here. Thanks for jumping in, Rico.
Hey,
Nice to see you.
I have to call Rico because we we connect with our DNA, so we are definitely related, blood related.
Oh, so Rico, so what you're saying here, so this is hot off the presses. I wish I had a little breaking news. So I don't know if you guys out there know that there's a term called plantation cousins. And I learned this from my cousin Floyd. And I'm gonna be really quick with this. So we call plantation cousins. Floyd, tell us what a plantation cousin is.
They're individuals who have share the same surname and have come off the same plantation. However, we don't know if there's a direct blood connection. And
Right.
so Rico's grandfather was called Fred, and I called him Uncle Fred. Uh,
Okay.
I didn't know if there definitely was a connection, but I've seen the Ricardo and Justine connect, and they are blood related to several of us in our family. So that lets me know that there's definitely a connection between their branch of Toomers and ours.
So we have the Toomers in that we call the Jersey Toomers that came from Houston County. We have uh, we call them the Perry, Georgia Toomers, and we were all held by the same people. And through DNA, we see that we do have a connection. So that's amazing. We have to talk about that more. My Uncle Philip's in the house. I'm so excited. My Uncle Philip's here. Thanks, Uncle Phil, for coming in. So Sharon is going to go ahead. Sharon from Galveston, Texas, is going to go ahead and share with us about the history of Juneteenth. So go ahead, Sharon.
Well, thank y'all for inviting me. And history is very important to me here in Galveston, and Juneteenth is definitely important because it happened right here in Galveston, and we called it Jubilee. Sometimes we call it Jubilee. So, of course, you know that the Atlantic slave trade between the 1500s and the 1600s brought millions of enslaved Africans to the New World. And the whole purpose of them arriving was to be the wheels in the agricultural economy of this United States. Of course, they could be bought and sold. They had no pay. They had no legal rights. They were not allowed to read and write, and they could not make decisions, not even about their own families. And so their life was substantially hard, to say the least. And all of this suffering, despite the fact that the United States had a Declaration of Independence that very prominently said, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. All. That they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They had none of these things.
Mm-mm.
They were basically just being used for the agricultural economy.
Mm-hmm.
This was not a sustainable business model. And eventually, after the slave trade was halted from Africa, or the importation from Africa of slave trade was halted, there became a rift between the North and the South as the Union was expanding to the West. They didn't want slavery to go westward, and the South and the North got into it over states' rights. And I say that with quotations because it was states' rights to hold slaves. Eventually, the President of the United States at that time, Abraham Lincoln, issued a proclamation, and the Emancipation Proclamation, after a bitter, bloody war that killed more people in that war than all the wars that since that point up until now together combined. More people were killed in the Civil War than that. So it was brutal.
So
but anyway,
can you tell us what the Emancipation Proclamation did not do? Like, there's a lot of they say it freed all the slaves. So what?
No, it didn't. It only freed the slaves who were in Confederate territory, rebellious states, to be free forever. And that was an effective date of January 1st, 1863. So it took other legislation to free all slaves.
All the slaves.
This was just the rebellious states. And they actually named the rebellious states in the Emancipation Proclamation. So it was effective in 1863. So initially, January 1st, 1863 was considered Emancipation Day because that's the effective date of the emancipation of enslaved people in the United States. But Texas didn't comply. Why didn't Texas comply? There are many legends about it. They say the messenger was killed on the way to Texas with the news of freedom. They say the news was deliberately withheld by the slave masters to maintain the labor force on the plantation for one more year. They say federal troops actually waited for slave owners to reap the benefits of one last cotton harvest before going to Texas to enforce the Emancipation Proclamation.
So what do you think it was?
Well, I'm going to tell you. Then they said people just didn't know. Well, I know for a fact that everybody knew because it was in all papers across the whole United States, including the Galveston Daily News. And while most African Americans could not read or write at that time, trust me, they knew what was going on. The more likely explanation is that the Confederacy was still in charge of Texas at the time in 1863. The Battle of Galveston was fought in January of 1863, so the Confederacy won that battle and they held Galveston. Okay. The other thing that is significant is that they had only been in the Union for less than 20 years. They were the Republic of Texas before that.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about Texans, you know they're very arrogant. And they feel, yes, I have to say, they feel like, and they threaten it all the time. Oh, anytime something happens they don't like, they say, well, we can secede from the Union and we can become the Republic of Texas. That's very true unless there's FEMA money involved. Then they want to stay in the Union. If a disaster hits, then we are a state. But enslaved people were smart. They knew what was going on. They knew the Confederacy was still in charge. and that if they tried to establish their own freedom or leave, that they would be shot and killed. And so that's the more likely view. You know, the Black people knew it was coming. Everybody knew it was all over the papers. But the more likely reason is that the Confederacy is in charge, and they were still saying we could be the Republic of Texas. And this was the Western frontier. There were not a lot of battles fought there, and it was far away from everything.
My cousin Clarence lives in Texas, so he says, "You right for you are sure right."
It's a different kind of place here to live here. It really is. So enforcement finally comes to Texas on the 19th of June, 1865, when Major General Gordon Granger arrives here in Galveston with troops. He came by ship from Mobile. He came into the harbor here, and he delivered 5 general orders. You are more familiar with the 3rd general order, but he actually delivered 5. The 5 military orders that were delivered by Major General Gordon Granger. And the one that we most know about is General Order number 3. And the first line reads, "The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with the proclamation from the executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of rights and rights of property between former master and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that of employer and free laborer. The freedmen are advised to remain at their present homes and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts and that they will not be supported in idleness there or elsewhere." Now, there has never been a slave that was idle, period. And this was a very, to me, it was kind of disparaging for them to put that in there. But nevertheless, they were free. So let's take a look at the other general orders. The first one said, all the arms, horses, and munitions of every description belonging to the so-called Confederate, and they said that, were to be turned in at once. That was the first thing they said. Then they said, you can go to Columbus, Colorado, Texas, and pick up your prisoners of war. That's where we'll parole them. And then, of course, the third general order was all slaves are free, and they now work for wages. The fourth one says all acts of the Texas legislature or governor issued since secession are declared illegitimate. And the last one, probably the most important to them, was we're taking all the cotton. We're taking it to New Orleans and New York, and we're selling it to the United States purchasing agents. So wow. Bring in the cotton. Wow. And so one question that's frequently asked when I'm talking about Juneteenth is, why did they deliver the news of the freedom of the entire Texas in Galveston? Because Galveston is just a small little island. Right. They delivered it here because Galveston was basically the Wall Street at that time of the South. There was a deep water port here, and the shipping and receiving of all the goods came in here. The most important one of those goods was what? All the cotton. So cotton came in from the interior to the coast, and that's where it was shipped out to the rest of the world. So Galveston was an economic powerhouse here, and there were more millionaires here than any place else in the United States.
Wow.
So this is, that happened on the 19th of June. And then on the 21st of June in 1865, it was published in the Galveston Daily News for all to see. And of course, there was quite a bit of turmoil surrounding this, not just when they got there, but even before they got there. Because first of all, Granger came with troops, over 2,000 of them, and a lot of them were the United States colored troops. So to see Africans in uniform carrying guns was pretty amazing at that time, especially in Galveston, the Deep South. So things were pretty tumultuous during this period of time. On the 31st of December of that same year, in the Flakes Bulletin, which was a little kind of a little revolutionary paper. I won't say revolutionary, but they published things that the Galveston Daily News did not publish. And then there we see there was a Negro celebration planned. The colored residents of Galveston proposed to celebrate their emancipation from slavery by a public meeting on the public square on tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock.
All right, so, we had it planned.
Here is the first announcement for the first documented celebration of Juneteenth in Galveston. And then we go a little bit further, and there's in the same paper on a different page is a little bit more detail. The Emancipation Celebration by Colored Persons, and that is right there. All colored persons residing in Galveston are invited to attend on New Year's morning at 10 o'clock at the public square. I see I have a typo there. To celebrate the abolition of slavery. Addresses will be delivered by Alex Pierce Howard Kavanaugh and the Reverend Daniel Gregory. All colored people and their friends are invited to attend. United States officers are especially desired to be present. So Alex Kavanaugh was one of the Freedmen Bureau agents down here at the time. I think he was the assistant commissioner. And so it was held under the auspices of the city of Galveston. And we learned on the next day when they reported about it on January 2nd, they gave a great description of it. In fact, this whole column describes it. The first half of the column talks about the weather, and it starts out, the year of grace 1866 gave us a most uncomfortable specimen of its quality yesterday. A more stormy New Year's could not well have been anticipated. It bore particularly hard on the freedmen who celebrated their emancipation from slavery. And then the second paragraph tells the colored people of Galveston celebrated their emancipation from slavery yesterday by a procession. Notwithstanding the storm, some 800 or 1,000 men, women, and children took part in the demonstration. The procession was orderly and creditable to those participating in it. A meeting was held in the Colored Church on Broadway, at which addresses were delivered by a number of speakers. Among them was General Gregory, Assistant Commissioner of Freedmen. The general gave them a great deal of good, plain advice, which, if they follow, will redound to their well-being and prosperity. The Emancipation Proclamation of President Lincoln was read. So this is confirmation that the Colored Church on Broadway was Reedy Chapel AME Church. And that is the church that I'm a member of. So the church on the left is what it looked like back then. And that church was destroyed by the fire of 1885 that swept across Galveston and burned half the city on the east end. And we know that this is the Colored Church on Broadway because it is the Colored Church on Broadway.
Broadway isn't like Church Street where there's like a church on every corner.
This is what the church looks like today. It was rebuilt within 2 years of that original church being burned. And so every year, this is we re-celebrate and reenact the processional and the program that was held on that day, January 1st, 1866. And of course, we do it on June 19th. How did it become Juneteenth? The 19th of June. So June plus 19th, contract that, and you get Juneteenth. So Juneteenth celebrations started here in Galveston. They used to be called Emancipation Day. Sometimes they were called Proclamation Day. It was, of course, the celebration of freedom. It was all about reflection, prayer, and thanksgiving, education and self-improvement, cultural activities of the ancestors, and a wide range of activities, always headed up by barbecues and food at the center of the activity. People played baseball. There were many family reunions. There's fishing and parades. And even today, Juneteenth is a celebration where people hold their family reunions and they all come home for Juneteenth. This year is a bit different because of the pandemic, but Juneteenth is definitely a day that many families hold their family reunions because of the tradition of celebration.
That's got to be a great time in Galveston.
It is a great time. It's a great time. The whole city turns out and really it's a great time. Curiously, when I was growing up, though, I knew we had a great time, but I wasn't all that clear about why we had the good time. I knew we were eating and we were partying and we were in the park and all that, but I wasn't clear on why. It didn't matter because I was a kid and everything, the food was good and all our friends were and our families was around. So that is difficult for me to explain to people. How could you grow up in Galveston and not know about Juneteenth? But I learned it once I went away, and I went to school in Washington, D.C., and there were tremendous celebrations in Washington. And then I began to, do research, and then I started to find out more. But I will read you something that was in the paper today, and it's pretty amazing, but it kind of explains the dichotomy of living here where Juneteenth began and having people in the larger community almost denied that it exists. This is an article that was written. The headline says, Facebook will take the Juneteenth day off, but most of Galveston won't. And so the writer of this article asked the mayor of Galveston, the Democratic mayor of Galveston. He says, while Juneteenth has been a state holiday in Texas since 1980, allowing many state employees to take the day off, is not recognized as a paid holiday in the city and county in which it originated. And here's what the mayor said. I guess we never thought about it. It just never came up, said Galveston Mayor Jim Yarborough, who's been in the office since 2014 and was county judge from 1995 to 2010. It never crossed my mind, to be honest with you. Come on. So that's the challenge of living here. I've told you that many times. Sometimes living in Galveston is hard because of things like that. We are still in the deep South and they still believe it and love it.
Yeah.
So celebrations started all over the country. Not everybody started celebrating on Juneteenth. Most people in other parts of the country did celebrate during January or either the day that they actually found out. This one is one of the earliest ones I found, and it was in Charleston, South Carolina. And this is an Emancipation Parade, and it was held in February. So that was curious. But over the years, Juneteenth became...
Oh, I love that.
Isn't that gorgeous? This is so beautiful. And this is an indication. This shows you how seriously Juneteenth was taken for many years as it first began to be celebrated. It also shows you the type of prosperity that was in this area.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the enslaved people here did not work on cotton plantations.
Okay.
They primarily worked on the wharf and in houses. And so they had this reputation for being well dressed and uh, a little bit more fashionable than most. And the enslaved people who did work on cotton plantations were owned by the rich people who lived in Galveston, and they had their enslaved people on the plantations more in the central part of uh, of
Hmm.
Texas, because Galveston is a small island. It's only 2 miles wide at its widest point,
Okay.
and it was pretty much a city. There was no large open
Mm-hmm.
fields for
Mm-hmm.
plantations here. So they were house slaves. Juneteenth celebrations were all over the state. This one happens to be in Austin, where the center, a lot of the larger celebrations that are still documented, that we can find documentation are the photographs are from the Austin area. And it's always so interesting to see these
I've
people
always seen
because,
this one.
yes, because you know that they have dressed in their very finest, and
Yeah.
they are proud to say that they are now freed
Yeah.
people, freed people living their own lives for the first time in their generation, and maybe, multiple generations prior. And so the pride was great. This is our reenactment of meeting at the town square, and the town square is still here. That statue behind you happens to be a Confederate statue that is praising all of the individuals who were so brave and fighting for the Confederacy. There's a movement right now to remove that statue, as you hear that around the country. I am not in favor of removing the statues. I'm in favor of erecting another one right
Yes.
next to it
Yes.
to
Yes.
tell the
The
truth of history,
story. Yep.
to tell why the statue was built and erected there, to continue a campaign of oppression and intimidation, to tell the truth of why they wanted to do that and what those brave, treasonous soldiers were doing to
Exactly.
maintain slavery.
I'm
It's
with you
too
there.
it's too easy to erase history and
Yep.
forget.
Yep.
And we don't want them to forget. I want
No.
to tell all the truth
Yes.
of it.
Amen, sister. Amen,
So
sister. Were you
I'm
going
not
to
in
talk about
favor of
Miss
that.
Opal?
Say again.
Were you going to talk about the trail?
I could talk a little bit about the
You
trail.
weren't going to. We could save that to the end.
Okay. All right. I'll keep moving faster. And there's me. We always,
Yay!
that's our Juneteenth t-shirt. That's what I'm
Yeah.
wearing, and Shamel is wearing that. You can see I'm sweating because it's hot. It's always hot.
Yay!
So we always invite our Buffalo soldiers to come down and read General Order Number 3, and you can see our Buffalo soldier standing next to me is rolling up the proclamation. He reads the proclamation, and I ring the bell, and then we start back on our march back to Reedy Chapel. And there's my favorite
Miss
drummer.
Sweetie. That's her sweetie pie.
And he's always our drummer in residence too, because we are Africans, and every celebration for Africans must include the
A
drums.
drum.
And so we march back to the church, and then we hold. Oh, then this is one of my favorite
Um,
pictures here. I just love this picture. I mean,
um,
they take it so seriously, and they just bring such dignity to the processional and to our march, and they just take it so seriously. And they are from the Buffalo Soldiers National Museum in Houston. They come down grace us with their
Nice.
dignified presence. And we
Nice.
even have lady buffalo soldiers, and I love that. Then we go into the church. This is the interior of the church, where we have a wonderful program of speakers and entertainers and music. And this is in keeping with the original program. We read very closely what exactly goes on, and they had a program of inspirational speakers and music, and that is exactly what we do. So that's our tradition. And our church is on the National Register of Historic Places. And as you can see, some of the details are quite impressive. The
Beautiful.
mahogany scissor trusses. Our church was established in 1848, long before the end of slavery. And it is the mother church of the AME faith in Texas. So we were the first one in Texas. The organ that you see at the back of the church is a Hook and Hastings organ from 1877, and there's only two in the country, and the other one is at the Smithsonian. So we're very proud of our church. Our stained glass windows are absolutely stunning.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
We have reenactments, we have story quilters, we have everything that we can think of that will bring education to the event and information to the event. As I said, I grew up celebrating Juneteenth, but I didn't understand it. So we make sure that all of our activities include the true explanation of what we're celebrating and why we're celebrating and the significance of it to African Americans. Our Galveston Heritage Chorale performs, and the person who started this is down in the left-hand corner. Her name is Mrs. Isola Collins. She has recently passed away, but she started this as a group to perform the songs of early African American composers. So the songs are magnificent that they perform. It's really, really nice. In 2014, we had a Juneteenth marker that was established by the Texas Historical Commission, and it was placed at the site of the Osterman Building, which is where General Gordon Granger had his headquarters when he arrived in Galveston. The first Juneteenth, Texas was the first state to have a Juneteenth state holiday, and that was in 1980, and it was done, the legislation was written and championed by Representative Al Edwards, and he died this year at the age of 83. So this is the first year that we celebrate Juneteenth without Representative Edwards, but he was definitely a champion for Juneteenth and bringing it to the legislature and making sure that it became a state holiday for him. We also had the opportunity to participate in Opal's Walk, and now there's a move, and you may have heard of it, to make Juneteenth a national holiday.
That's where we going.
Yes, that's where we're going. So if you get a chance to sign that petition, we want that to happen. Miss Opal came to Galveston, and she came to Reedy Chapel, and we walked with her, and it was amazing. She is 90 years old, and she walked 2.3 miles from Galveston. They marked it off. I forget what the significance of 2.3 miles is, but wherever she goes, she walks this 2.3 miles to get support for Juneteenth as a national holiday. So she needs you to go and sign the petition so that we can have a national holiday. And somebody sent me this, and I had no idea at the time that I would be in the upper.
Yeah, there you are in the upper corner there.
There I am.
I love that.
So I was really pleased about that. So why does Juneteenth matter? Juneteenth matters because it's history. This history has been systematically removed from the historical narrative because it is believed that this is a Black holiday. This is not a Black holiday. Freedom is always a reason to celebrate. And this is a Texas holiday, and it is a Texas celebration. This is Texas history, and it is United States history. And that's why it matters. If you don't celebrate the victories of the people in your community, then you don't think their lives matter. And everybody now is trying to open up their eyes to the fact that Black lives matter. This history matters. And if you recognize that this history matters, then you may not be so easily persuaded to believe there's any justification for someone to be shot in the back for sleeping in the drive-through of a fast food restaurant, or for being accused of having a $20 counterfeit bill. It just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't.
So other things that are going on around Juneteenth include this celebration of resilience that is at the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. That's all day tomorrow. And if you want to know more about the road to freedom, this is a really, really good documentary series. And if you really want some serious look at how today's events are just repeated from years past, then you want to look at this. I Am Not Your Negro, written by James Baldwin and directed by Raul Peck.
Nice. Sharon, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Is that it?
Now, one last thing. We are having all of you Toomers are invited to participate in our virtual celebration of emancipation, our Juneteenth celebration this year, because that's my husband. He left his phone in here.
Because he needs to come on, that's why.
Oh, God. Okay. Anyway, so I'm going to send a link to you, Shamel, and please share this with your family members, because we're having a virtual celebration of emancipation. And that's where we have the person, her name is Naomi Mitchell Carrier. She wrote the testimony for the Emancipation National Historic Trail, and she is going to make a presentation. So I would love it if you guys came.
Fantastic.
And it's going to be on Facebook Live tomorrow at 6:45 p.m. That'd be 7:45 your time.
And I will put that presentation on, I'll put the link on Toomer Avenue.
Okay.
So
all right.
Really,
I'm going to try to unshare my screen now so I can get back to you.
Yeah, unshare your screen, but we're good.
I got to find that.
So, hey, Cousin Floyd, you ready to talk to us about where the Toomers were?
That was good. I did it.
You did it. We can still hear you. You were great. Tell Kirk to come get his phone. All right, Cousin Floyd. Let us
both are going to share
where the Toomers were. You ready?
I guess I'm as ready as I'm going to be.
All right, let me share. So here we have just our little beginning here. And so what I'm going to do is share with you. Let's go to the next slide. Let's see if I can get this going. All right. So we did our beginning. We had our wonderful history. So now we're going to talk about where were the Toomers on Juneteenth. And so I'll start us out, Floyd, and then you could take up when we get to the record. So in 2000, at our family reunion, this was us. This was the Toomer family who showed up at the reunion. There was over 300 of us there. And what Floyd and I are about to do is we're going to take us from this mob of people and we're going to trace them back in time using documentary evidence or documents to show where the Toomers were on Juneteenth. So this was us. And so where do we all come from? Uh, at which reunion was it, Floyd? 2016, I think we had this created. Our cousin BJ, or Roberto Trinidad, Debbie Toomer's son, who is a desktop publisher, with the help of Floyd and Loretta and I, created this Floyd's dream, which was the family portrait that never was. And so in this portrait, you have uh, Mama and Papa, which is Bertha Toomer and Henry Toomer, or Bertha Walker Toomer and her husband Henry. And the rest are all of their children. They had a total of 16 children. And so all of those people at that reunion, mostly, we hail from Henry and Bertha Toomer, but actually one level up, which Floyd will share with you soon.
The original, must add that the original photograph was designed by Loretta.
Yes, Loretta did the original one.
Loretta Phillips, and BJ did the second version of it.
He did the second version, yep. And so if we keep going on our timeline, one of the children of Henry and Bertha was Uncle James. And Uncle James's claim to fame, and I would say our section of Berlin's claim to fame, is the tipping in that he created. Patti LaBelle called it one stop on the Chitlin Circuit, which there were a lot of, they called the African-American, the African-American clubs that played for African-Americans. So they called those the Chitlin Circuit. This is a picture of his bar. And everyone said, like, this is what you saw when you walked in. You opened the door. My cousin Mike, he said, you opened the door and boom, it was this big, giant bar. So you talk to anyone, that's what you hear about that bar. He had all kinds of people there. He had B.B. King there so much. He had Ike and Tina Turner there. There are stories of people from East Berlin who were almost Ikeettes. He had Fats Domino there. He had all kinds of people there. These posters were recreations of kind of like tipping in posters. We have so much talent in our family. My cousin Jeffrey Toomer created these posters of things that Floyd and I collected from newspapers.
And what he did when he created them, he was attempting to create the posters that we used to put on telephone poles that advertised all of the entertainers who were coming. And it was sort of like that. It was multicolored and it had all their pictures, etc. And so when we asked Jeffrey to recreate it, he did it in that fashion.
Yeah, very nice recreations. Very nice recreations. And so let me move on. Georgie Woods. What was Georgie Woods, Floyd? He was like a radio personality,
yes.
DJ?
For one of the radio stations. He was a DJ.
Because I always wondered, how did Uncle James get all these big acts? And would we credit his relationship with Georgie Woods is how he got all these acts?
He was one of many different DJs that Uncle James had contacts with. In fact, I have a little book, which was like his little address book. And he has all these people that are listed. And Georgie Wood and some other of the DJs are listed in there with their telephone numbers, etc. And
I didn't hear about this address book. I need to see this book, Floyd, in the archives. So yeah. You mentioned book. So you talk about the Green Book.
Well, the Green Book was written so that individuals, as they traveled going down the coast, from one state to another, they would have locations where blacks could eat and where they could sleep, because they weren't welcome in the white establishments. And that's what the movie was about. If you saw that movie, and Tipping In was in that book.
So let's go ahead and let's move on to some records. So we went from the 1940s, we were in East Berlin, and now we're going to go to the 1930s. So talk to us about this, Floyd.
In 1930s, this was from Berlin, New Jersey, and this lists Henry as the head of the household with his wife Bertha, and in it you'll see the children starting from Charles going down. The older children are out of the house, Uncle James and Lucille, but you have Charles, Robert, and Clarence, Albert, Susie going down. So those that were living, they're there, and it tells their relationship to the head, and it tells that they're male or female. It gives their age, and it tells you where they were born, and it tells you where their parents were born. And that's the part of the census that we're seeing. And it also tells you the race.
So that's 1930.
Exactly.
And so now let's move on to the 1920 census. Then they're where? In Philly.
Philadelphia. And when they're in Philadelphia, Henry still is the head of the household, and Bertha and the oldest son, James. But what you'll see in this one that's different is that Lucille Toomer, Henry's mother, it says mother, she's living with them as well at that time. So she had moved from Georgia up to Pennsylvania along with her son and his children. And it tells her age at that point in the 1920s. She was 38.
She was 65.
Yes, I was looking. 65 is correct. And she lived for 4 more years. She died in 1924.
So this here is just a like draft card. World War I and World War II draft cards are great genealogy records. They give you great information. And Papa was like kind of like an old dude, and it was kind of, I felt so bad for him that he had to fill this out. Didn't you, Floyd?
Yeah, but they had what they call the old men draft, the draft of the old men, and they had to fill out that paperwork. And I'm sorry, he was distracted. He didn't go into the service, but he was responsible, and he had to fill out that information for that registration card. Because as you can see, he was born in 1877, and at that time he was in his 40s.
And then down here, what's cool about these is you get to see their signature. So this is what Papa's signature looks like.
It's pretty nice writing.
Yep, pretty nice writing.
Yeah.
And one thing that everybody might notice is that Toomer is not spelled right. When you do genealogy, spelling does not count. If you look for the right spelling, you are never going to find your people. And so talk to us about this one, Floyd.
I can't.
So this one's in 1910. And this is Lucy.
Lucy, again, is Papa's or Henry's mother. And in 1910, she had moved from Perry, and she was living in Macon, the city of Macon, not Macon. And at that point, she was living in the household by, you can't see the man's name, but what you see is she's living there, and she is
the cook.
A cook. She's their servant.
Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next one. This one is the funniest. I have to talk about this marriage record. Floyd almost had a heart attack when we were at the and I shouldn't say that about Floyd, but he seriously started sweating when we was at the archive. When we at the state library in Florida pulling records. And when you pull records, you're pulling records showing, people saying, they're requesting, a certificate of marriage. And then it has like the marriage date. And so, yay, we found Mama and Papa. So here you have Henry Toomer. It's saying that he was a laborer. He was born in Georgia. And then it has his age, and then it has his spouse. And then on the next page, which I don't have, it had those columns, and there was no marriage date. And Floyd was rolling that thing up and down and up and down. Like, wait a minute, I know they got married. I know they got married. And so finally he exhaled because he did find a marriage and we're not all bastards. So you feel better, Floyd. So that's a marriage record. You're not always going to find those beautiful certificates. Sometimes this is all you can get. And so I thought this was cute, Floyd. If we go back to like the 1880s, this was, talk to us about this article. Rico might like this.
This article was written in 1883, and it was a news article that a news reporter wrote. And what he was doing was he went to the town of Perry and he spent the day and he wrote about who he had encountered. And at that time, Fred Toomer, who was one of the plantation owners, was still alive. And so he spent the day with Fred Toomer. Fred Toomer invited him out to the Toomer plantation. And he talked about how hospitable Fred Toomer was and what a great meal that he ate. He described the meal and he described the people there. And the funny thing that he did was every time someone was told that he had been invited to Fred's plantation, they would whisper and start talking about, oh my gosh, he's going out to the Toomers, the Toomers, because he was so hospitable and you have a good time when you're out there. The food was great. You know, they had a roast pig for
okay, that's from Uncle Phil. Uncle Phil roast our pig. So yeah, they had the big pig roast going on.
Yes, and they ate, and then after they ate, they all sat in the chairs and smoked cigars and talked about a lot of different things. So it's a nice article that I read, and they talked about one of the things is the blacks that worked on that plantation, or the blacks that lived there, the former slaves, that they were kind of like, I don't want to say uppity, but they were considered to have a little bit more than some of the other blacks at that time.
Yep. So then we keep going. We go back in time to 1880 census, and they're in Houston County, Georgia here.
Yes. And you see Caroline is at this time, Caroline, who is Lucy's mother, is the head of household right now. That's Papa's grandma. And she's a widow, and Lucy is 22 years old. That's Papa's mother. And then there's her sister, and then Sarah, and then down there where it says William H, and it says GSON next to it, that's the grandson. And believe it or not, William H is our Henry. So we found out that his name was William Henry Toomer, but he went by Henry instead of William. All his life. And he was 3 years old because he was born in 1877. And here he is as a 3-year-old.
Oh, Papa is a little boy.
Yeah.
And then we go back to the 1870 census. And this is like the key census for all African Americans because it's the first time that all people are listed by name. So talk to us about this, William Toomer and Caroline.
We see that William is Caroline's husband at this point, and we can see that he was the head of the household, and you can see that their children, Alex, Frank, Mary, Lucy, Lula, they're all his children, and there's Lorelia at the bottom, and you can see their ages, and they were born in North Carolina, the older ones, and the younger ones were born in Georgia, the children. But that's who our ancestors are at this point. We see William and Caroline, and then we see Lucy and her sibling.
So that is the first census after slavery, the first federal census after slavery. So our next one, I can't even remember what it is. I'm so excited. Now we're going to keep going back. Oh, come on. And now we're getting to the point of, we found them in that 1870 census. Now, the question is, just 5 years before 1865, where do we think the Toomers would have been? So we know that they were in from 1870. They were in Houston County, Georgia. So this is kind of like the tree. Henry's papa. His mom is Lucy. That's a picture of Lucy. Who does Lucy look like? I want everybody on here who knows who in our family can you see that Lucy looks like. And then we know that Lucy's parents are Caroline and William. And so we believe that they would have been in Houston County, Georgia, on Juneteenth. And it was probably roasting a pig. They probably had their own Juneteenth going on. What you think, Floyd?
Yeah, they were in Perry, which is Houston County, and it's a nice, cute little town down there. And probably, like you said, eating some food in somebody's backyard.
Pam says she looks like sister, which is my great grandma.
Yes.
All right.
And the Zinga.
And the Zinga. I wasn't going to say it. Susan. Clarence says she looked like Susan. Yup. I say Susan. Susan for sure. So let's keep on going back. Here's a slave census. And so talk to us about what a slave census is, Floyd.
Well, prior to 1870, 1870 was the first census in which blacks were listed by name. Not everywhere, but sometimes they did list them, but not all the time. Prior to that, in 1850 and 1860, what they did was they would have the plantation owner's name listed. And as you can see on the left-hand side, the plantation owner, his name was Henry Toomer. Mm-hmm. And then you see the column is saying that that's one person who is 70 years old. Well, let's go where Henry is. It says one person who is 30 years old, he's a male and he's black. And they say an idiot. So this person right here is somebody.
Why they call him an idiot?
Because that was somebody who's challenged.
Oh.
He had some kind of mental problem.
There was no political correctness back then.
Exactly. They just wrote it. They didn't have any filter. And so you can see every time you see that one, and then it says the age, that's another slave. So what it did was it counted the slaves of the plantation owner. And so you'll see Henry Toomer and everything that's blank, all those people underneath that, they're individual slaves. So that is the owner, and then that's the slave. The slave is there. So that's how they did the census record for those individuals.
Now, this is like the king of the records. Like, this is the record that everybody wants. They want proof. Oops. They want proof of that this person who owns them. And we are so blessed and so lucky to have this record that our cousin Floyd pulled out of the archives of Georgia. He didn't go on ancestry.com and pull this up. He drove his Toyota Corollas. What did you have? Corollas? He drove his Toyota Corollas down to Houston County, Georgia, and bought this record back. So talk to us about this 1858 Toomer slave deed.
Okay, what you have here is a copy of a deed which names Caroline, our ancestor, and her 4 children. Caroline was 28 years of age at that time, and she and her 4 children are being sold from one Toomer to another Toomer brother. They are brothers, and she was being sold from one master to the next. And it described them. Alexander, a musty, 6 years old. Frank, a musty, about 4 years old. Mary, a musty, about 2 years old. And Lucy, a musty, an infant. Lucy is, again, our great grandmother.
That's her right there. This is her listed on here, Lucy. So what's a musty, Floyd?
So, well, what they have is just like you have a mulatto and you have an octoroon.
Oh, wait a minute. Floyd's muted. Hold on, Floyd. Oh, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
You
what?
said you have an octoroon.
Yeah, you have octoroon, you have a quadroon, you have a mulatto. So, and a musty is in the same category. They are terms that are used in certain parts of the country to describe the amount of white blood that a slave has.
Okay.
So, depending on the dictionary, a musty has a certain amount of percentage, but you get the idea.
Yep.
So, what they were saying is that those children, they were all mixed, and they were being, as you can see, they were being sold from one plantation on to another. And I found that in the courthouse, the Perry courthouse. And I was in there looking for some records, and I came across something in the index that said B/S. And what I found out was that was a bill of sale. And so that was the bill of sale. And the amount of emotions that I felt at that time, I was happy, but then I felt like I wanted to cry. It was really deep. I mean, I didn't know what to do. I wanted to scream, I wanted to holler, but I was inside the building, the courthouse, and everybody was looking, and I had to stop and start just breathing and relaxing and breathing, because it just was really an emotional time. It's really, I don't know how else to describe it, but it's still.
What's emotional for me is when you look at these words that says,
yes,
slaves for life.
Slaves for life.
And this document, to me, is not just talking about Lucy and those listed.
Mm-hmm.
This document is talking about me. Yeah. This document is talking about you. It's talking about Clarence and Barbara and Pam and all of those family members who are on here. This was supposed to be our condition. Slaves for life. Exactly. No, there's no way out of that. For life.
Yes.
So if we look at it, we have Henry and, oops, did it move? Hold on, I need to share it. We have Henry, and on our Toomer side, we have Henry Toomer. And his mom was Lucy, dad Robert Jackson. Her mom was Caroline
Jackson.
Sorry, Robert Jackson, and Lucy's parents were Caroline and William Toomer. Then we have the Walker side with Bertha, who was Henry's wife. Her parents are Florida Giles Walker, and Florida's parents are Nancy and Jack Thompson. So we've just told you where the Toomers were on Juneteenth. We believe they were in Houston County. Let's now take a look at the other side of us and see where the Walkers were. And so on the Walker side, we have they're living, we know that they were in Leon County. We know they were in Barber County. They were in Duval County. So let's take a look at some of these records that we have from them. So this is another marriage license, and this marriage license is for Nancy Atkins. So this is Mama's what?
Grandmother. And they were living in Tallahassee, which is the capital of Florida.
1871. This is a marriage record from 1871. Yeah. And so the next thing that we found, and this was the thing that broke everything open for us. I mean, this was huge. Yeah. This is what they call Freeman's Bank record. You want to talk about this one, Floyd?
In this, you have the Freeman's Bank record. So they have the index, and we put Nancy, because Nancy is our ancestor. We put Nancy Atkins in. And when we did, this information came up showing that this is not her card. This is her brother. Her brother's name is Ephraim. And on here, it shows that he had money in the bank. And what they did is they had to fill out this form, this information, and it gives you his mother and father's name, children, and his place of birth, residence, where he lived, and then they have remarks. And then he says in his remarks that his brother named Solomon White and his sister was named Nancy Giles. And Nancy Giles is Nancy Atkins. That's her married name, Giles.
Yes.
And so from this, we found out more about him about Nancy than we knew before, because Aunt Ida had told me that Nancy had two sisters, and the sisters' names were Patsy and Miley, but she didn't know the names of the other individuals who were siblings. But from this, we found out that they had a brother named Ephraim, and that she had a brother named Solomon White. So that gave us 5 family members at that point.
In that one record, yep. And so then we said, okay, so who was this Ephraim, who's this Hester? And from that, we looked in the census. You always want to just go take a look at those census records. And here we found Ephraim with his wife Diana, his children, we believe his children. And then down here, we see Hester Mills, and she's living with a Thomas Ross. And if you see, Thomas Ross is listed as white. She's listed as black. He's listed as a planter, and both of them are from South Carolina. So we were very, very interested in who is this Thomas Ross.
But Hester Mills, we didn't say before, Hester Mills was also on Ephraim's Freedman Bank record and listed as his mother. So that's the first time that we saw her name, was she was listed as his mother. And then we saw that she was living only a couple houses down from her son. She was living as a servant. And this is cut short. If it was up a little higher, you would have seen the other brother, Solomon White, and his family all living on that same street.
Fantastic. We have more of Georgia Toomers, Mo Washington, Fred Toomer's great granddaughters here. We have Perry Baylocks here. We have Dean Henry. We have all kinds of people here. Thank you guys for showing up. So let's move on. So this is another record that we found on them. And this is another group of records that's like, if Sharon and I if we could only look at one record for the rest of our life, it would be the Freedmen's Bureau records. We could just wallow. We would just roll around in them records. But this is one that we found from 1868. And the Freedmen's Bureau documents African Americans during Reconstruction. So it's very key record. So here we found Nancy Giles with her husband Harris and 2 of their children. And so when we found Thomas Ross, we were like, who's this guy? And it says he was a planter, but was he actually a slave owner? And so we went to the slave schedule, and here we found Thomas Ross was a slave owner. And here you could see, the ages, the sex, and the color of the enslaved. And so what did we do? We said we needed to go to Google, right? We went to Google because Google is like a great place to go. We went there to find out more about Thomas Ross. We also found this guy named J.J. Williams. And J.J. Williams was pretty interesting. This guy, it said that he had slaves in the value of today's money, $2.6 million. $2.6 million. Google also said that this J.J. Williams had this LaGrange plantation. And here you can see a map of Leon County, Florida, and it shows this red area is where LaGrange plantation was. Also on this Wikipedia page, and I didn't blow it up good enough, but on here it says that Thomas Ross was an overseer for J.J. Williams. And it lists all these people were overseers for J.J. Williams. When you have $2.6 million worth of slaves, you have a whole bunch of overseers. And so the other thing that it says on here that, you can't see is that J.J. Williams inherited a whole bunch of slaves from Noah Thompson. Noah Thompson.
His father-in-law.
His father-in-law. And so Floyd and I, we got blessed and we took a trip out to Salt Lake City. And in Salt Lake City, we found this estate record. So talk to us about this estate record, Floyd.
Well, when we looked up Noah Thompson, what we found out that he died. And so it's a shame because after this, we start wishing that everybody had died prior to the end of slavery because that would give us some information. And when a slave owner dies, they did an inventory and they did an appraisal of all the property. And we started looking through the inventories, trying to see if we could find slaves that were listed.
And it was over 100 pages. It was over 100 pages, this estate record.
Yes. And then, so what we did is Shamel had tapes and I had tapes, and we were going through the microfilm trying to find out. And then once again, we came across and I saw they had a listing of the inventory and they had a listing of the slaves. And so I started looking at the names, and on the right, you'll see how much that they assessed each slave. And you see Nancy, $600, and then you see Ephraim, and then you see Patsy, and then you see Becca, and you see Ephraim, and then you see Solomon. And what I started realizing was that was the Atkins family cluster. Those names. Remember, there's Nancy, and then there's Patsy, and it's Miley is on there. Those three names, and then you see the names of the individuals that we had found on the Freedmen's records. You see Solomon, and then you see Ephraim. So you had those individuals who were siblings, and then it had their wives and they had their children listed, and it would say the number of children. And so, bang, one more time, we had found the plantation on which another set of our ancestors had lived. And that was great. Here we are. We were dancing out there in Salt Lake City because that was the second plantation that we had found. And we found, see, it's important. You can say where you believe or you think your family comes from, but when you find the documentation and find them, and you can find them in numerous places, 2 different places, bill of sale, and then here we found them in the inventory of the deceased slave owner.
And what was cool, what I did is, like, they have what they call present money. And so this is what this Nancy was worth, $600 in 1855 money. And so I wanted to find out how much is that in today's money. And that was today's money. And this, I think that when I last did this, it was probably like 2010. In 2010 money, it was $17,000. So Nancy was worth $17,000 in today's money. So that's pretty interesting to find that record. I think I blew it up even bigger. Maybe. Yes, I did. Just so that everybody can see it. And what's really important here is that a lot of times people will find people in the 1870 census and then they'll just say, oh, I'm ready for slave research. But the only way that we could tell that this Nancy was our Nancy is because Floyd did the research. He did the oral history with old, I'm not supposed to call her old Ann, with Big Aunt Ida. And, collapsing that with the records, clusters, that's the only way. When you go beyond 1870, you got to take your peeps. And this is a way where you take your peeps. And that's like, you got to bring your cluster.
Exactly. It helps to identify because you'll see a lot of slaves have the same names.
So yes. Especially in the Toomer family. If I hear another Fred, every time I hear Fred Toomer, I'm like, oh my God.
Henry,
so many Freds. And so if we look now, to answer the question, where were the Toomers during Juneteenth? We look at the Toomer family on that side. Then the Toomers they were probably in Houston County. And when we look at the Walker side, with Florida and Nancy Atkins, from our research, we can say that they were probably in Leon County, Florida.
Yes,
That's what we can say.
definitely.
So we now know the answer. Did anyone have any questions for Floyd? I'm gonna bring Sharon back in here. How you doing, Sharon? Unmute yourself. You can unmute
That was
yourself.
wonderful. I was all excited. I'm sitting like we always want the owner to die before the end of slavery. We
Yes,
always want that.
it's a shame, but we do.
We always want that. And I love the
So
name
Floyd
of the tipping
and
in. Love that.
we love it. So everyone who joined us, we have people from all over. We have some Baylocks in here. We have some friends from North Jersey. Terrence is in there. We have people from AAGG. Dean is here. We have Juliet here. Charlene, my Uncle Philip. You hanging and still hanging in there? Co-worker from North Jersey. Carolyn is in here. Charlene, line dancer, one of Candy's line dancers. Lancy is in here. All of you family members, if I didn't call you out, apologies, but fantastic. Thank you. Oh, question. Barbara has a question. Let us hear us. What you have to say, Barbara. Let us know. So you guys know everybody wants to be a Toomer. They always ask, can I be a Toomer? So Barbara, did you have a question, honey, cousin? You're going to type it in? If not, we are going to end this I was going to say podcast. Thanks everyone for sticking with us for an extra 20 minutes. All good information. They were free. Who was free, Barbara?
Were the Toomers free? I guess she's saying were the Toomers free and
Oh, no, they were enslaved. The ones that are in our branch, the ones Lucy and Caroline and William, we have found no evidence of them being free, right, Floyd?
no, not. But I think she's. I guess she's asking were they free as a result of June of the Emancipation Proclamation.
Yep, because Houston County was a rebelling
Yeah,
area.
it was a rebellious state.
They were freed when the Emancipation Proclamation,
Right.
prior to Juneteenth.
That's correct.
Clarence wants
Yes.
to know, are there any family members still living in what was Houston County, Georgia?
Definitely. There are Toomers in Houston County. I started going down in the 80s, and I haven't been down lately. But when we've gone to Georgia, we haven't been to Houston County. But Shamel and I and a few others, we've even gone to some of the Toomer reunions down in Houston County. And in Perry, they still have some of the Toomers. And a few of them are on the on this.
Yes, we have
Simon and
go
Mo.
here. We have Mo. Mo Washington asked, will this live be available after tonight? Yes, it will be. This recording will be available on the Facebook Live Toomer Avenue page, and it will also be on the Toomer Family New Jersey YouTube channel. So yes, Mo, definitely have your family check it out. And Clarence, I don't know if you were on when we were talking about plantation cousins, but we've always, because of Floyd's research, he's like expanded the Toomer Nation connection in that we had what we called us, the New Jersey Toomers, and then we had what we call the Georgia Toomers, which Rico and Mo come from, and then we have South Carolina Toomers. Then we have North Carolina Toomers. And North Carolina Toomers, if you guys remember, they always came to our reunion. Corrine and Peacemaker, they would all, come to our reunions. And so what we found out, because we always wanted to know, like we were trying to use paper to see if we were related, all of these different Toomers owned by the same family. And what we found out, Clarence, is that through DNA, that Rico, did he actually take the test? Was it actually?
Yes, he took the test, and his aunt Justine. I knew those two names, And so it's about between 25 and 30 of us up here in New Jersey that have taken the test. Now, they don't match all of us, but they match
some of us.
16 branches. Yes, they match enough of us, so we know that they're definitely connected. And so, but we don't know whether it is from Caroline or William. We don't know which one. Right.
Fantastic. So we're going to wrap this up. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Sharon, have a fantastic day there in Galveston tomorrow.
Thank you. I'm expecting y'all to join me. I sent you the link.
Oh, good. I'm going to put the link. I'll put the link. Yay, Juneteenth. Mara,
so you can all participate in it virtually with us.
So Mara wanted to know if there were ever any Toomers that were free, never a slave.
Well, see, that's a hard question to answer because of the fact that there's so many situations. I'm quite sure. I've seen situations where individual slaves were manumitted by their particular plantation's owner. So you have free persons of color in every family somewhere. So it's possible, yes. But majority of the slaves that we saw in Houston County were slaves, the majority of the individuals from the plantation owners.
Fantastic. Thank you all. I really appreciate everyone. I did not announce who I was. I am Shamel Jordan, and I'm the host of Genealogy Quick Start TV. So definitely check out my Facebook page and go to genealogyquickstart.com. I'm doing shows live, so they're on my YouTube channel and my Facebook page, so go check them out. Again, thank you so much, Floyd and Sharon and attendees.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.